the development that there is. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms Wilkinson.
The application in front of us has the car park in that location. Discussions have taken place with the developer about whether it could be positioned further, closer to Tuttons Hill, and therefore there wouldn't be the need for the long road. I think we were there on site, we walked to that point. I certainly don't think it would be appropriate to have it further down that hill because it would require significantly greater engineering to provide it. In order to provide that facility closer to the housing element of the development, yes, you could take the traffic through Place Road, through Deauville Avenue, through Cordelia Gardens and into the housing development and then into the Sang. It's about accessibility. We've got a pedestrian route coming in through Tuttons Hill. It's considered to put people in the Sang, not in the housing development. It's a car park for the Sang. It is not a car park, an overspill car park for the housing development. We don't want a through route. We don't want that provision. The car park is intended for users of the Sang. If you start putting it close to the housing development, I would surmise that it would start to be used as an overflow car park for the housing development. Therefore, by separating them, you provide that clear distinction that it's not a public car park for general housing users. Actually, it's a car park for the Sang and for that provision.
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson. Councillor Cox.
Local concerns have been raised in regard to the management costs for the site and whether this would impact on the affordability of the site in the affordable housing portion. Would it be appropriate to ask for deeper discounts to offset this additional cost to those people?
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Ms Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chairman. In essence, the planning authority don't set those figures. The public speaker, the agent David Long, has outlined that it would be in the region of £320 per year for a service charge that would cover the maintenance of the public open spaces on the site as well as the Sang, if I understand correctly. I personally, my judgment, I don't think that's outrageous to have that addition cost. It would be for the developer to discuss to discuss with individual purchasers whether there was a discount available. It wouldn't be for the planning authority to stipulate that value.
Thank you. Any additional questions from colleagues? Councillor Churchman.
When we visited the site where Tutton Hill comes down, I was appalled at the amount of water draining off the hill behind down into that road, and I'm not convinced that anything I've read is going to be able to mitigate that, because the problem is that we have now as a country is when it rains extremely hard in short spasms. It's not like 30 years ago where you got rainfall which was spread over a day. Now we get an absolute deluge, which is what is part of the problem of flooding across the island anyway. So that's one real major concern. Tutton Road, where the entrance comes in, is at the bottom of the hill, and I'm not convinced about the drainage. Secondly, a car park will bring its own problems. Where I live, cars come and park, and it's down go the windows, out go the KFC and the McDonald's and the bottles and the cigarette ends and the vapes. You know, that sort of car park in the middle of nowhere, I'm afraid, could attract a lot of debris. So who's going to take care of all that? And also, I'm afraid to say, it could attract some form of car or even motorbike racing. I had a problem like that in my ward, motorbikes herring up and down a private road. How do we, when you take agricultural land out of the system, then there's nobody to properly maintain it. And I think my biggest concern of all, that this will turn into, you get stung or stabbed area of nettles, stinging nettles, any other sort of blown, what's ragwort, because you've got to look after land. You can't just leave it. and assume it's going to look after itself. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Churchman. Ms Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to do them backwards, if I may, so I don't forget the last point. I think ultimately what's interesting is that what we are looking at as SANG is a managed area of open space. The current fields are not managed, and therefore all of the concerns in relation to nettles and brambles are relevant now. They're there. What we are looking at is a managed open space for the provision of amenity for people. Therefore, there will be, as we discussed, I use the term ranger, it's probably not the right term, but there will be a site manager, a ranger, who will look after that land, who will maintain and ensure that the grass is cut appropriately when necessary in conjunction with biodiversity, that the site is acceptable. They will also look at litter collection and all those things associated and attributed to the car park that you raised concerns regarding. And the provision of a gate, in essence, will stop access at night when you have potentially a greater potential for those antisocial uses of a car park. The car park will also be within the SANG, so it to an extent will be self-perpetuating. I can't imagine, you know, we're hoping that by providing, or the developer is hoping that by providing a car park and a SANG, it will be used. People will come, they will wish to use that open space. That movement of people in itself is an element of natural surveillance that you wouldn't get if you just had a SANG. If you just had the open space, you wouldn't necessarily get that same level of people using the space, because the provision wouldn't be there. Or those people may park in the street. You may get a significantly greater amount of parking in Tuttons Hill if you didn't provide a car park so that people could actually be off the road. In relation to the first matter and the last matter that you raised, Councillor Churchman, the issue of the water, yes, we did see a substantial amount of water in the entrance of the site off Tuttons Hill. There is obviously no drain there at the moment. That is free-flowing water that is coming off the fields. The application will be managing surface water. There are, I think the plan showed 3 large attenuation ponds which will be holding that water, and at the base of the access, Island Roads will insist that there is a drain incorporated. I know we talked on site about an Arco drain, which in essence will stop water flowing onto the highway. So actually by providing a drainage scheme and incorporating sustainable drainage principles into the site and attenuating that water and controlling that flow, you can significantly improve the current situation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson. Supplementary, Councillor Churchman. Councillor Price, followed by Councillor Spink. Councillor Price.
Are we into comments now, or are we still on questions?
Well, I think it has become something of a movable feast. I would like to try to keep things question-based, but I feel that you may have more of a hybrid point, in which case I would not seek to stop it.
I certainly have no question.
No question. If I could, I will come back to you, Councillor Price. I just want to invite Councillor Spink to ask a question, followed by Councillor Jones-Evans. Thank you, Councillor Spink.
This is, I think, only in my second or third outline planning matter that I've had to consider. And I always find outline issues quite difficult because, for example, at paragraph 3.4, it says means of access is the only matter under consideration at this stage. Now, does that mean then that we can't consider coalescence, breaches of neighbourhood plan, etc.? I always find that a very confusing statement.
Thank you, Chairman. If I clarify, the use of the term matter there relates to the matters you consider as part of an application and those matters that are reserved. So an outline considers 6 matters and you either reserve them or you consider them. So they are layout, scale, access, landscaping, and I'm now testing myself. There's one more, which has just totally escaped my mind, but it will come to me. So the principle of the development you are considering, which incorporates settlement coalescence, the accordance with policy. What you cannot consider in detail is the detail, in essence. So the design, I think that's the one I missed. The design, the landscaping, the scale, or the layout of the housing development aren't matters that you can consider. It is only the access that is being considered as 5. But that is the principle of development is something that you have to consider. That is ultimately what is being sought, is that whether you accept the principle of housing development on that parcel of land as identified in the red.
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson.
Thank you.
Councillor Spink. Supplementary? No. Councillor Jones-Evans, followed by Councillor Brody.
Just quickly, is it going to be similar the way the land, the SANG is going to be managed to the situation you have at Branston Farms? That might help members if it is similar, because I mentioned the word range, right? They have a range there, don't they? Or, okay, yeah, clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Jones-Evans. Ms Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chairman. I will be entirely honest. I do not know the situation that currently exists at Branston Farm, so I would not wish to speculate that the situation would be the same. But it effectively would be a managed space.
Thank you. Supplementary? No. Councillor Brody.
I'd just like to explore the coalescence issue. It's fascinating, isn't it? How nobody's mentioned it really until Peter said the word. But when you look, if you had your screen up again, I mean, when we look at the existing settlement boundary, it's minuscule compared to the proposed site for house building. Setting aside the SANG, I don't have a problem with the SANG personally, but the housing delivery, the principle of building housing there, I think was it's hard to see where the housing goes on that, Sarah. That's the other one might be better. Yeah, I mean, we can see it. It's like the Danzig corridor. Does anybody know what I mean? Yep. Yeah, isn't it really the Danzig corridor, which gave Germany access to some part of Poland before the Second World War. I mean, it's absolutely minuscule. I had an application of my ward some years ago, which eventually ended up being built out with posh caravans, which was nowhere near the settlement boundary. But I was persuaded by the then chair of planning that it shouldn't be called in, etc., because it was so near, and because it was only a tiny bit of land. Well, there was no objections apart from a couple of people nowhere near my ward. I didn't take it any further. But this is about a substantial housing development in an area that quite clearly, in my view, has got, 6 meters? 6 meters of attachment to the settlement boundary on Place Road. I find that quite, I mean, is there a rule of thumb here? I mean, as you guess, I mean, the report mentions affordable housing, but, is there a rule of thumb here that, as to what percentage of the land that's going to be taken for a proposed housing development has to be adjacent to the existing settlement boundary? Because I would guess that that's less than 5%. I'd probably guess it's about 2%. And that would probably still be a bit high. Is there a rule of thumb? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brody. Ms Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chairman. No would be my simple answer. There isn't anything that stipulates a particular proportion of the site has to be immediately adjacent. However, officers did note during the kind of determination of the application, or during the preparation of the report of the application, that there is a very small section of the application which could be classed as immediately adjacent. And that's why, councillors, you'll note in the principal section of the evaluation, it's actually considered both as if it's immediately adjacent and as if it's not. So the substantive development area of the site has been considered as if it's in the wider rural area. And as a result, housing need has been taken into consideration in the assessment of the suitability of the site, as well as the sustainability of the development area of the development. And so in that section, we've been very conscious that there is a very small proportion that's immediately adjacent. So it is phrased in a way to say, yes, in technical terms, it's immediately adjacent, but officers have accepted that the substantive development element of the application is in the wider rural area, and therefore a need has been considered, and that is referenced in that principal section of the evaluation.
Thank you. Mr Bolter.
Thank you, Chair. And just to add to that, point, councillors. You may remember that in public speaking, it was referenced that the core strategy was considered to be redundant. I would just like to clarify that point. It is not redundant. It is still part of your decision-making framework. I think the key point there is that there are certain policies within the core strategy that could be considered out of date. And those policies would be those most related to the provision of housing. And in which case SP1 could be considered to be one of those. And what we would then look at thinking about is whether the development, not to what extent any of it is immediately adjacent or not the settlement boundary, but whether the development location is in what could be considered to be a sustainable location. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bolter. Supplementary, Councillor Brodie. Content with Councillor Wilkinson's answer? Yeah, thank you. Colleagues, are any other questions? Councillor Spink.
I wasn't going to raise this, but because Mr. Bolter has, I think it is the case that there's been almost a year of discussions between the planning officers and myself as to the interpretation of the tilted balance and SP1. And I'd just like to say and make it clear, and I'm sure Mr. Bolter will confirm this, that I have served a Court of Appeal judgment, Gladman, in 2021, which in my view has this effect, that SP1 is still applicable in law, but because of the tilted balance, the weights that we give to it is a matter for us. So you can't say, because it goes against the core strategy, that SP1 is no longer relevant and you can substitute a local need for an island-wide need. What you can do, in my submission and what Gladman makes clear, is you can say, I'm not, because of the under-delivery of housing, we only attach minimal weight to SP1, but you can't rewrite the core strategy. And I've kept my peace on this for a year, but now that it's come out, that is my view on the law.
Thank you, Councillor Spink. Mr. Bolter, is there anything you'd wish to say?
No, thank you.
I think what I would say as Chair is that I think that's
Which
a valid
interpretation of the law are we going to act on then, please, if Mr. Bolter's got no, because it may be relevant to further proceedings.
So I think, thank you, my Chair. Thank you. The first point is this is established through the MPPF and the tilted balance in paragraph 11, which is not law, it's actually national planning policy. I think you're right, Councillor Spink, that the weight that you give to this point is down to the decision maker. And on other parts of the wider discussion, we have over the last 12 months agreed to disagree, and officers are satisfied that the position that they have taken is an acceptable position to take and have based their advice to you accordingly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bolter. I feel this may be a matter that perhaps would be appropriate possibly for the debate if you feel so inclined, Councillor Spink, but certainly I would not wish to curtail matters, but I am conscious of time. Are there any questions?
Sorry,
I will briefly defer to you, Councillor Spink.
As a supplementary to that comment,
Yes.
I entirely agree. And I've been trying for over a year to clarify this. And as you know, Councillor Drew, I've sent you the Court of Appeal Authority and you've declined to comment on it. To be told now that we should get on and discuss it, I've been discussing it for a year.
I take the point. I think my position simply as chair of planning is that this is still something of a moot point and it is going to come down to the interpretation. I appreciate that you have a strong interpretation of that particular ruling, but I think ultimately it is still going to come down to decision makers, which is what democratically we are elected to planning committee to do. I don't think, in my belief and submission, that it would be appropriate to come out strongly one way or another in particular in relation to Gladman, but I understand your frustration. I am keen, however, to perhaps not bleed into that debate and perhaps suggest that we move to
Certainly.
further questions.
Provided it's clear that we're making the decision that SP1 is out of date and island-wide need has been substituted for a local need. I disagree with that, but I'm prepared, because it will be on the minutes and on the tape, and there may be further proceedings. I'm prepared to proceed on what I consider to be incorrect advice, but I'm being advised here and I take it. I don't agree with it, but I will make my decision accordingly on that wrongful advice.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, but that is noted, and I think that's something that may get picked up in further debate, but certainly noted. Are there any further questions from colleagues? Councillor Churchman.
Just a quick question. Having toured the existing site, which I really think is good, first class, etc., adding on the extra building area, can you give me a figure of what the total of the site that's almost finished and the new site will, total number of housing? Because I've lost track. Looks like Sarah has, because it really does concern me that this is outside the settlement area.
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson.
Simple answer is no, because the application is an outline, so it does not establish a number of units. It does not propose a number of units. So the we can't be specific in terms of the overall number that would be proposed as part of the outline application.
Please.
I'm going to say 96.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions? If not, we'll move perhaps to the debate portion of the agenda item. Is there anyone who would like to commence? Councillor Press.
In debate, you mean?
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I hate to agree with Mr. Long, that, no offense, but, you know, this application, although we have no details of the, of what's really going to be built, from an outline perspective, it ticks a whole load of boxes that the last one didn't. You know, we have the ability to orchestrate what comes next, really. We can ask it to come back before us for the reserve matters. That's in our gift, isn't it? And we can, the scale and the number and the makeup of those phases is within our gift for us to give the rubber stamp to at a later date. When it comes to the SANG, it's a shame it's called a SANG. No, it's a horrible word. It's a horrible acronym that's used. If someone called it the, and I'm going to really offend the people from Gurnard here, but the Gurnard Country Park, it would be, you know, it would sound a whole lot better. When you look at somewhere like Golden Hill Forts Country Park, you know, which is a lovely, beautiful area around a residential development. I know it's much different, but it's still a beautiful area that the public from all over the island can enjoy, and they would have to park there. So there's a car park there for people like me to drive to. Like Councillor Brodie would cycle out there, I'm sure, and probably get there first. But the you know, the SANG is actually the biodiversity from a SANG as opposed to redundant. Oh, sorry, I'm just going to say the wrong thing there, aren't I? Redundant farmland has a much better yield for carbon absorption and everything else that comes with it, and the wildlife will flourish there more than it does on a cultivated farmer's field that would have machinery going across it, taking out any element of wildlife that might live there. Any element of wildlife would be absolutely decimated by farm equipment. Now, if I've always found it really hard to vote for anything that removes farmland, and particularly anything that provides food production. You know, there's nothing in front of me to tell me what has been grown on those fields in recent years, whether they've been used for grazing or crop growth or anything. If there is anything, I'd be interested to know. But I think if the development is going to mimic something of what's already been built, you know, you've got a really beautiful development, and I know the local people aren't going to like me for this, but it's a beautiful development. You know, the houses look like they've always been there. You know, if there's ever a style of housing that we should adopt across the whole island, it should be that. The detail on the roofs, all of the architecture within that site, if that was adopted as our two design codes for all of that housing on the island in the future, we would only be building beautiful houses, and they can be built cheap. The architecture is built into the build. It's a choice not to put good architecture in. It's a choice to cut corners and not put good architecture in. And us as the custodians of planning need to make sure that good architecture is put in. But going back to the I'm trying to take a different approach tonight, where I maybe talk about the things that other people aren't talking about. The Sang, I think, particularly does offer a good community benefit, and it kind of ensures that land isn't going to be brought forward for any development in future. We're actually protecting that land in perpetuity. So that is an important part of whatever decision we make tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Councillor Brodie.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm just conscious of the time, and we still have another application to deal with. I entirely agree on this application with Councillor Price. I think the Sang could be part, whatever you want to call it. It is a form of protection for the people of Gurnard in the future, but perhaps the people of Northwood as well, who I noticed also objected to this application. I've had a satisfactory answer regarding the Danzig corridor element of it. You know, I clearly hadn't read that section. As I already said earlier this evening, I haven't read the reports in as much detail as normal, but I've gathered enough from them. But thank you for that, Sarah. I would like to make a formal proposal as usual, so as we can perhaps get on with it. I would like to propose that we approve this application with conditional permission, subject to the planning conditions covering the following matters, and you have them listed at the back. Can I also, as part of that, propose that reserved matters, i.e. the details, are brought back to a future planning committee? And as part of your discussions regarding that, as you'd expect from me, regarding any affordable housing element, a minimum of 70% be affordable housing for rent. Thank you. In perpetuity. Thank you, Derek. In perpetuity. And I'll seek a seconder. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Andre. Are there any additional comments that colleagues wish to make? Councillor Andre.
Just very briefly, because I am mindful of time. I'm aware of the application before us and what we're actually being asked, and that is outline of permission. My concerns, like Councillors Brodie and Councillor Price, were with the Sang, have been satisfied. So I am in support of this application. Thank you.
Councillor Andre. Councillor Stewart. Councillor Spink, beg your pardon.
Thank you, Chair. I'm against this application. I'm against it for a variety of reasons. I think the Sang, whenever I've heard of a Sang, and again, it's only my experience on the planning committee, it's always been as part of a housing development. And it's often used by applicants who are close to the sea, so that they can say that people will exercise in the sea, exercise in the Sang and not go to the coast where it might cause recreational harm to the scientific sites and protected sites. So I find the concept of a Sang as a standalone feature a little strange. I also don't see how it can be justified to take away grade 3 agricultural land. And as for protecting the land for the good folks of Gurnard and Cowes, or Northwood, it seems to me that they should be the people. We should take into account their wishes rather than ours. And they've made it perfectly clear that they don't want it. Moving on to the residential application, I think it's ludicrous to say that it's adjacent to the settlement boundary. It's in the wider rural area. There should be a local need. I've not seen anything of a local need. Local need does not mean, in my view, island-wide need. It will fill in the site boundaries and will cause coalescence. Coalescence is a material planning consideration. It will be contrary to the neighbourhood plans. Neighbourhood plans are a material planning consideration. And for those reasons, I shall be supporting the people of the parish council and the people who represent, and also Councillor Fuller there. I shall be supporting their wishes, which I think are properly justified on material planning grounds.
Thank you, Councillor Spink. Councillor Price.
I have to say, in that respect, then, Councillor Spink, you should be putting forward a refusal proposal rather than just vote against a proposal that someone else has put up. That would be the fair way to do it. So
Well,
I would suggest that you would.
I lost on the.
Are there additional comments from colleagues? If not, we will go to the vote as proposed by Councillor Brodie, seconded by Councillor Andre, to approve the application with those particular points Councillor Brodie mentions, referencing affordable housing, coming back obviously as a detailed matter before us. So those in favour of the proposal to approve?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
And against?
1, 2.
Thank you. There are no abstentions. The matter is passed. We have 22 minutes potentially to deal with our final agenda item. I'm just going to seek clarification as to whether that's even possible. Yes.
The art of the possible, Chair.
Splendid. Well, we're going to move on with swift alacrity to agenda item 3, which is land adjacent to Osborne Works, Whippingham, which is reference 22/02293/0 OUT. And I will invite Ms Wilkinson to present on this matter.
Thank you, Chairman. The application site is located on the southwest side of Whippingham Road, as shown on screen by the red outline. For locational purposes, we have GKN to the north, CCAM to the southeast. Approval has been granted in this area of the cursor for a fuel depot. Consent has been also granted in this field for 8 solar panels.
If I could, sorry, pause.
Sorry to
Councillor
interrupt,
Jones.
Chair, and Ms Wilkinson. I'm going to have to excuse myself from this application, given that it's part of my portfolio work in Regen. Is that okay? I do apologise.
Yes, no, certainly, that's fine. Yeah, we'll just take a very brief pause. Are you're proposing to leave, Councillor Jones? Okay, sure. Yeah, no, certainly.
The area at the point of the cursor to the west of the site has consent for solar panels, ground mounted solar panels. And the area at the point of the cursor came to committee, I believe, last month, and got consent for what is in essence an almost identical building as now being proposed on this site. So the proposed, a few photographs, but councillors, you did visit the site very recently. The application in essence seeks consent for a storage and distribution hub, a B8 use in this area of the site. This is an outline application with only access to be considered. So at this time, the nature of the building, its design and its layout is purely indicative, but it does show a building incredibly similar to that was granted as part of Unit 1 at the last planning committee, with a very similar design principle. That would be a distribution hub for a storage and distribution company. As I said, the application is purely outlined, dealing with the principle and access only, but the application is incredibly similar to one proposed on Unit 1 last month. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson. We now then move to the public speaking element. We have one speaker, Mr Phil Salmon. Salmon, you have 6 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I won't be taking 6 minutes. This application proposals have been subject of extensive discussions with officers in order to achieve delivery of a new, fundamentally important logistics and transport infrastructure to serve the Isle of Wight. The current application proposals seek outline consent to enable future expansion of a successful firm that has recently gained permission for the front site at Whippingham. The centre would essentially replace the existing facility at Merston, which is not fit for purpose, nor is its location ideal in terms of relationship to cross-Solent links. The proposals have a significant benefit to all Island residents, businesses that receive deliveries of all kinds. That's basically everyone. The application also serves to provide new jobs on the Whippingham Technological Park site. The key planning considerations are as follows. The site already has outline planning permission for business granted in 2012. This application really seeks to establish the principal use of the site that has long been supported for new jobs. The outline consent would allow some flexibility in a changing market. Reserved matters submissions will be required to establish and approve the final design and scale. Proposals do essentially future-proof the business. The proposals will create 200 additional jobs, that's together with the front site. This is an important facet of the now ageing core strategy, which seeks provision of 7,500 new jobs from 2012. The site is accessible to key island mainland ferry links. The applicants currently use Red Funnel and East Cowes, and the island roads are supportive. There are no adjoining residential properties, and the site sits amongst existing industrial uses, GKM, CCAN and CERTAS, and conditions will nevertheless ensure residential amenity is protected if necessary. The scheme is planning policy compliant and supports significantly the objectives for economic regeneration and enablement of effective, sustainable transport logistics. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Salmon. That concludes our public speaking elements. Question, Councillor Price.
I haven't got a question. I'm the ward councillor for Fairley and Whippingham. I have no objection to this application. I've had no representations or objections from anyone, and have been supportive of the other schemes at that site. It was what it was built for, or it's what it was allocated for, let's say.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Councillor Churchman.
Oh, sorry, Marie.
Yeah.
Do apologise. I lost train of thought. Just propose that we accept the officer's recommendation and we vote on it.
I'll second. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Stewart.
Just very briefly, as for the past previous application, can I suggest that we recommend that they have solar panels put on the roofs? I know it's an outline, but nonetheless, I think it should be something that should be raised at an early point rather than later.
Are there any comments from colleagues in relation to that matter? Any additional comments or questions, in which case we will move to the votes. So the proposal is to accept this application to grant consent proposed by Councillor Churchman, seconded by Councillor Brodie. Those in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
And against?
None.
Abstentions?
None.
Thank you. Excellent. Carried. We have 15 minutes to go to questions. Committee member questions. Are there any questions, comments? Or forever hold your peace. Mr. Boswell.
Thank you, Chair. Just ever so quick, and not wishing to keep anyone from going home, but I'd also just like to place on record my thanks to Ms Wilkinson, who has presented all 3 items this evening at relatively short notice due to unexpected absences of 2 officers. So I'd just like to place that on record. Thank you.
I would certainly second that. As always, the presentations have been top notch. Well, that concludes Planning Committee for today. Thank you to colleagues. Thank you.